First off, I know I've been posting a lot of stories here, but I have a lot to share. Anyway, my dad has had near-death experiences, basically died but was able to be saved about 3 or 4 times. The most serious one was when he was crushed by a car. It was before I was born. He was working on his friend's car for him. He was under the car, trying to take out the transmission when it got stuck. He yanked on it a couple of times, but it didn't budge. He pulled on it a few more times when he heard a loud groan. The almost 4,000-pound car then slid off the jack stands and fell on him. Then there was complete blackness. All of a sudden, he is shaken awake. He's driving a Ford truck, and he had fallen asleep. He was woken up by his grandfather, who had passed away a year or 2 ago. "Wake up," he said. "I fell asleep at the wheel." I've been thinking lately that he meant that he had fallen asleep at the wheel at life. "And you're not done yet," he continued. I've also been thinking about this too. Maybe he meant that he had further accomplishments to make? His twin brother, who had died at birth and looked just like him, then chimed in. "If you want to be done though, there is plenty of room up here." My dad then opened his eyes. He looked to see his friend jacking the car up. He closed his eyes again. He woke again to see people standing around him. "Is he dead?" someone asked. My dad then widened his eyes and said, "I was just crushed by a 4,000-pound car. Are you just going to fucking stand there or help me?" The crowd around him gasped. "Well, sir, if we move you, you might die," a doctor said. "Well, sir, if I don't move, I'm gonna die eventually," my dad replied, irritated. He then fell asleep again, and awoke in a hospital to find his family surrounding him. Just then, a doctor walked in. "Oh, Mr. M, you're awake," the doctor said. "After examining you, we can't find anything wrong with you." "Well, there must be something wrong with me. You know what happened," my dad replied. They then ran him through a CAT scanner to find that he had punctured his lung, broken about half of his rib cages, and a lot of other things. Recovery took about 6 months, but he survived without any permanent damage. The reason I'm posting this in our Paranormal is because of the encounter with his grandfather and brother. This was not a dream. He had never drove or seen the type of car he was in. He identified it after doing research. I'm also posting it here because of how insane it is that he survived all of these deaths. Do you think that he is somehow significant? That some outside force has kept him alive on purpose? Other things paranormal involve him, such as dreaming about deaths where they happen. A few years ago, I voluntarily checked myself into a mental health facility for depression. During my short stay, I met someone who I believe was a shapeshifter or reptilian-like being. At the time of my inpatient treatment, I had never taken medication for depression. I had never done drugs and rarely drank. To this day, I never drink and have never done drugs. My experience was not a hallucination or medically induced psychotic experience. I have never told anyone about this experience until now because of when and where it took place. While there, I met a patient who I believe was inhuman. I was told she suffered from schizophrenia and dementia. She spoke rapidly and in incoherent sentences. Mostly, she sat in corners and cried hysterically. She had a very large head and an unnatural hairline. Her hairline looked like each individual hair had been threaded delicately into her scalp. Her jawline was wide and protruded. The strangest thing about her appearance were her eyes and teeth. Her eyes were very large and oval. If I looked closely at her mouth, I saw extremely pointed teeth. When she noticed me, she would stare at me creepily. Despite her small stature and relative feebleness, I got a predatory vibe from her. Everyone, I mean, everyone stayed away from her, even the nurses and counselors. It was such a strange sight to see, and it was unspoken to avoid the patient. One day, I noticed the patient was in a better mood. She would let her hair down and seemed upbeat. She glanced at me and I smiled. That was a bad idea. She gave me the strangest grimace or smirk, and I felt naked. I can't describe it, but I felt like she had been putting on an act and was emerging as she really was. I felt like I had unlocked something I wasn't supposed to. Later that day, I caught her in my room staring at me as I used the bathroom. She had a ravenous look on her face, and I practically screamed when I noticed her. I ran out of the bathroom and told her she wasn't supposed to be in there. I didn't go back in my room for the rest of the day. The next day, she approached me and told me I reminded her of a childhood friend. Although I felt very uncomfortable, I was happy to hear her speak coherently. I smiled again and she asked me if she could sit with me at lunch. I agreed and we ate together. During our lunch, the patient seemed happy to be near me. She seemed normal and relaxed. She was like a different person and I felt safe around her. A few more patients joined us and we ate our lunch without issue. That night, we had a group activity and the patient didn't participate. She was crying hysterically again and speaking incoherently. At one point, she was sent to her room. When she came back, her hair was up and she looked deranged. She wandered around the room and looked lost. She stared at me and grimaced. I felt sad because I realized the brief moment of clarity and joy she'd had was just that, brief. The next day, she approached me again. I was sitting in a chair and looked up. Her large eyes were more oval-shaped and her irises were black slits. She also pronounced everything with a slight hiss. I thought, I'm really losing my mind right now. I blinked a few times to make sure I wasn't seeing things, but her eyes were like snake eyes. Her teeth were pointed and jagged, and her mouth looked like a large O. Everyone in the room was staring at us, even the nurses. She continued to speak incoherently and told me I would make a good house mother because I would protect the babies. A few male nurses who I had never seen before came and took her to her room. She said she didn't want to go, but they guided her away. That was my last day there. I was released the next day, and I've never been back. I recently had a very lucid dream that has turned my life upside down and really disrupted my schedule. To give context for this dream and a little bit about me 2 years ago, I ended things badly with a girl who I had been for over 4 years. I treated her very, very badly in my young age. Cheated on her, didn't do anything for her, emotionally abused her, lied to her constantly, and yet she worshipped me and loved me more than anyone else ever has. In my stupidity, I ended things with her, and she moved on, and ever since then, I have instantly regretted it. I've lived in a constant state of pain, missing her, and wishing I could fix the damage I did there. I decided a while ago not to ever contact her, because from what I know, she is very happy and engaged now, and I can't risk having any effect on that happiness after everything that I already put her through. Now, I'm not a superstitious person at all. I have never had any sort of crazy experience that made me truly believe in the supernatural. The other night, I went to bed and I started having a dream that I was fully aware of while I was having it. Usually when you realize that you're dreaming, you have full control of the dream for the most part, and then you wake up. That wasn't the case in this dream. I had no control of where I was whatsoever. It's like my consciousness had been dragged from my body because I could literally feel my body in my bed. To set the scene of this dream, I was in those woods that were as real as they could get. There were large grey pine trees everywhere, and I was in the middle of a small clearing. The grass was a hazy yellow-green that almost glowed in the sunlight, but not in a warm way, more of a sickly way. The sun was shining bright through the trees like it does right before sunset. There was a hazy grey dust floating through the air. This place to me felt so real. I felt my physical being there, while at the same time feeling my body and being fully aware back in my bed. This was a dangerous place. I could feel the unsafeness of these woods. My heart was beating so hard back in my bed, I could literally feel my body sweating in my bed. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't wake myself up. Then I felt the presence of something very bad, almost like the feeling of pure death itself was about to come for me. I turned to one of those large grey pine trees that I felt this presence coming from. Slowly from behind this tree emerged a little girl in a white lace dress, the kind a child would wear on Easter Sunday. She had no shoes on and had dark black hair. Her skin was an ash grey. It reminded me of cigarette ash. Her face was so horrible. Where her eyes and mouth should have been were just black holes that had this staticky border to them that constantly moved. She started to move towards me, and I could feel this being probe my mind. I could feel its curiosity as to why I had brought it to me. As it moved towards me, its body would shift in a static white noise kind of way in random spots. Then it spoke to me. Its voice was a horrible, deep, piercing sound. It asked me, "What desire have you called upon me for?" I remember struggling, thinking that I never called this thing, and all I wanted to do was tell it to go away and wake up from this. But I couldn't. And it's almost like it dragged my desire out of me, and I spoke what I had been wanting to know for a long time, unwillingly spilling it from my mouth. "Does my ex still love me?" It laughed at me and said, "I have nothing to do with matters of the heart and cannot tell you anything about love." So I asked a logical-based question. "Does my ex ever think about me?" I instantly regretted this. The creature said to me, "Yes, she does. The price has been paid," and boomed horrible laughter as it flashed right in front of me and grabbed my right upper arm, sending a horrible cold pain up my arm and into my heart like a needle was being shoved into it. She kept laughing as her horrible empty black hole of a mouth came closer and closer to my face, swallowing my vision up until I felt my consciousness slam back into my body, and I sat straight up in my bed, not feeling like I had been asleep, and drenched in sweat and freezing to death as I felt the remnants of the stinging pain from my arm to my heart where she had touched, throbbed, and faded away. I feel like I made a deal I was forced into with something I have no idea about. Ever since I've had this dream, I feel this overwhelming presence of being watched constantly, like someone has turned on a TV channel to my life and is observing me. I've never had a supernatural experience like this, and I'm more scared than I've ever been in my life. Has anyone else out there seen this little girl demon before, or have they ever heard of anything like this? I need to know what I've done. I need to know if something is going to happen to me or how I can make this go away.